Bag of money. As soon as I opened my eyes, I could taste that horrible dryness in my mouth that always followed a heavy night of drinking. I wanted to down a full bottle of mouthwash to rid myself of the minging texture. The only thing stopping me was, of course, the pounding hangover trying to break its way through the shell of my skull. This was by far the worst hangover I had experienced in the 19 years of my existence. My dad was forever telling me if I couldn't handle the hangovers now, I'd have no chance by the time I was his age. Rich coming from the man who couldn't spend an evening without knocking back a few whiskeys before bed. Typical fatherly thing to say to encourage his son to man up. The only visions flashing before my eyes from last night's antics were of me slamming back Barbie bomb after Barbie bomb. I believe it was me who decided to introduce them to everyone in bulk. I think it was just that they were pink and tasted like pure sugar, making them go down so easily. The thought of alcohol made me think of something someone had mentioned to me last night. What was it now? Oh, right, that was it. The earlier you jump into a shower after waking up from a heavy night of drinking, the less intense a hangover will be. It sounded a bit like an old witch's tale. Should I try it? Perhaps it was a little late now, considering it was supposed to be more of an old-school dine and dash, jumping over tables to exit a restaurant to avoid paying the bill, as opposed to sneaking off to the toilet and hoping there was a half-open window to climb out. I decided to check my phone, hoping correspondence could help fill in last night's missing gaps, since I couldn't recall how I got home. Phone's dead. I used the charger that was hanging off the side of the bed to stick it on charge. What now? I might as well go pee and get it over with. As soon as I lifted my head off the pillow, even the slightest movement made me lightheaded. I squeezed the palms of my hands onto my mattress to refrain from falling off. It was only a precaution, though. It only helped trigger flashbacks of last night's dance moves, the ones I chose to embarrass myself with on the dance floor. My hangover only felt worse when the cringe factor was added. What drunk me constituted as dancing was me waving my arms around in the air like I was directing traffic in the middle of a busy interchange while I tiptoed circles around other dancers. And don't forget the awkward dead stare I apparently displayed on my face that made other dancers extremely uncomfortable. I didn't normally allow myself to dance in front of other people, but clearly I had too much to drink. I finally made it to the toilet, in only my boxers, where I struggled to piss in a straight line. Maybe I should have gone with a sit-down pee. Moments later, I was back curled up in bed, under my duvet covers. My phone had managed to turn itself back on while I had been away. I immediately noticed that I had 0 notifications, which made me feel rather sad, considering I wanted to be enlightened by everything I had done the previous night. Maybe not knowing is a good thing. I went into my photos, and I couldn't believe how many pictures I had taken last night alone. Selfie after selfie. I must have just been grabbing anyone, male or female, demanding a selfie. I scrolled all the way back to the pictures from the start of the evening. How had I forgotten about the money? Who in the right mind finds a bag full of cash in the back seat of a taxi and quickly forgets about it? Clearly, there's something wrong with me. It was all coming back to me now. I ended up getting an Uber to the bar last night to meet up with my friends. I had already drunk 2 bottles of beer in the house while I got ready, so that might explain why I decided to grab the bag rather than bring it to the driver's attention. My Uber driver had dropped me off directly outside the bar, which meant I had to slide over the back seats to avoid opening the door directly into oncoming traffic. It was only then that I noticed the bag lying on the floor. Without a second thought, I grabbed it as I exited the vehicle. My first thought wasn't that there could be money inside, but that it could lead to a funny story to tell my mates. Or perhaps I might find something interesting inside, like a gun or a bunch of dildos. So, when I strolled into the pub bar, dressed smartly for a night out on the town, clutching a Navy Herschel bag over my shoulder, of course, the first question my mates were going to ask was, "What's with the bag?" After explaining where I found it, they insisted I got it opened. I unzipped it right in front of them, so we all spotted the cash at the exact same time. My first thought was to quickly zip it over and check if anyone in the bar had noticed it. The last thing I wanted was to walk out with a target on my back. My friends were already on their feet, full of excitement, when they realized what this meant. I had to tell them to calm down while I circled the room with my eyes to make sure people weren't staring in our direction. Some had, but they were mainly sudden glances. I still panicked, though, and took the bag with me into one of the toilet cubicles. There, I truly discovered what I was holding in my arms. 5 large bundles of pound notes were tightly tied together with elastic bands. I unwrapped one and counted each and every 50-pound note. It came to a total of $5,000, which meant I had 25,000 pounds resting on my lap. That was a hell of a lot of money for a skinny little postman who still lived with his parents. As I flicked through all the pictures on my phone, it hit me. They were all of me with complete randoms drinking pink shots, aka Barbie bombs. I remember now. I was literally buying everyone and anyone a Barbie bomb if they promised to take a selfie with me. I recall telling myself that this would be my chat upline, even though it wasn't solely used on women. I had them with random men too. So, what does that mean? Suddenly, my phone exploded with Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Snapchat notifications. I didn't know where to start. When I did make my way through them, some of them weren't easy to look at. My friends had posted pictures of us all holding large amounts of the stolen 50-pound notes on social media like we were wannabe gangsters. A tad cringy. The most recent messages on our WhatsApp group were about the cash bag. They all wanted to know how much was inside. I was smart about not sharing the exact amount for obvious reasons. I merely boasted that they wouldn't have to pay for a drink since I was going to make it a night to remember. This was ironic, considering I seemingly couldn't remember most of it. I noticed one of the comments on the group chat mentioned something about Ibiza. I now remember being on my phone in the bar, looking up flights to Ibiza. What if I ended up booking them and forgot to share them with everyone? I went straight into my emails to look for anything confirming a booking. I checked all 3 accounts. Thank God. I must have gotten distracted by the thought of another Barbie bomb selfie to go through with the booking. There was even a mention on the group chat about a golfing holiday in Portugal, which was odd considering I hadn't swung a golf club in my life. It quickly dawned on me as I sat up in bed. Where the hell is that bag of money? I began to frantically search the room with my eyes. My bedroom wasn't that big, but it was exceptionally cluttered, mainly with wrestling merchandise, even though I stopped watching it back when I was 15. I just had this sick feeling in my stomach, based on how drunk I ended up last night, that I had somehow managed to lose all that money. The only thing that managed to knock me out of my deep moment of severe anguish was the sound of my bedroom door being chapped. "Alan!" my mom shouted from the other side of the door. "Are you getting up?" "Mom!" I shouted back in an inquisitive tone. She opened the door to find me still sitting upright in the middle of my queen-sized bed. "Is everything okay?" She immediately asked me, "Did you hear me come in last night?" "I couldn't help but notice how loud you were being," she said judgmentally. "What time did I get? Do you think I sit up all night staring at the clock, waiting for you to get in?" she asked, half joking. "Yes," I said with a grin on my face. She smiled back. "I didn't look at the clock, son, if I'm being honest with you. My older brothers, Jack and Harry, who had long flown from the nest, once told me that Mom always waited up for them whenever they went out drinking. She would constantly worry that something terrible might happen to them. She clearly watches too much true crime on TV. My older brothers were 12 and 10 years older than me. It was safe to say that I wasn't planned. My dad didn't want my mom working at her age. He preferred that she be home and have the house in order, which was a shame considering she was a qualified accountant who hadn't worked full-time for well over 30 years. She'd do self-employed tax returns for friends and family, and an odd job here and there, but apart from that, her primary job had been raising 3 boys. "I've made scrambled eggs for you and your dad," she stated. "And while you're having breakfast, I'll vacuum your floor. You must have dropped something on it last night while you were drunk. Did you have yourself a midnight feast?" I followed my mother's eye vision to the floor next to my bed, where my jeans from last night lay inside out. She was right. There was white stuff on the wooden flooring. It wasn't until I noticed the small plastic bag sticking out of my jeans pocket that it dawned on me what the substance was. It all came flooding back to me, snorting cocaine from off some random woman's pocket mirror in the men's toilet of the nightclub. How much coke did I buy? When I looked back at the doorway, my mother was no longer there. That was my cue to get up and find the bag of money. I turned my bedroom upside down while only wearing my boxers. I didn't think my room could have looked any messier than before, but somehow I managed to make it worse. I threw on a pair of plain black joggers and a Stone Island hoodie. I was just about to go searching the rest of the house when my eye caught sight of my phone still charging by my bed. Should I message the group chat? Maybe they might know. When I made my way into the kitchen, I found my dad sitting at the table in front of a plate with only a few crumbs left on it. He hadn't bothered to acknowledge me from behind his broadsheet newspaper, which covered the entirety of his face. "Just help yourself, son," my mom advised me as she kept herself busy wiping down the kitchen counter. "Do you want some toast on?" "Let him get his own breakfast," my dad snapped. "He's capable of doing it by himself." My mother had always been like this, making sure everyone was fed before she had eaten herself. My mother's kind heart also made up for my father's impatience and stubbornness. "I hate it when people say they've put a problem to the back of their mind," my dad said out loud as he remained fixated on the news story. "How do people manage to do that? Temporarily forget a problem they have when mine are always stuck at the front of my mind where I can't hide from them." He glanced at me, expecting me to have an answer. When I never responded, he exhaled before he turned the page over. "Did you have a nice time last night?" my mom asked in order to change the subject. "Yeah," I replied, as I used the wooden spoon to scrape the scrambled eggs from the frying pan onto a small plate. "It was an eventful night, all right. Did you get into any fights?" my dad rudely asked. "Nah," I said as I placed the spoon back in the pan, leaving plenty of eggs for my mom to have. "Nothing like that, Dad. As long as you're the one who finishes the fight, that's all that matters. Bite him in the dick if you have to," my dad said, lecturing me. I sat down at the kitchen table next to my dad with my plate of scrambled eggs. "What made it such an eventful night, Alan?" my mom asked as she scraped the remainder of the scrambled eggs onto her own plate. "He's not going to tell us what antics he got up to with his drunk friends," my dad declared in an agitated tone. My mother and I glanced at my dad as he remained focused on his newspaper. "Well, my advice to you, Alan," my mom suggested, "if you find yourself chatting to a nice, sweet young lady, don't try and force her to go home with you just to have 2-minute sex. Treat her like she's the last woman on earth." My dad let out a sarcastic laugh, while his eyes never deterred from the newspaper. "That's how I fell for you and your charm," my mom revealed to my father. "You used to refer to me as your queen. You also told me you loved me on our very first date, and you went on to tell me you loved me every day, countless times a day, until we married." I sat quietly and ate my eggs. "Do you have my dig money?" my father asked from behind his newspaper. My mom and I shared another look between us. I spent the rest of my post office wages on the Stone Island hoodie I was wearing. My mom already knew this since I made her listen to my sob story yesterday when she was preparing dinner. I explained how all my friends were going out except me because I was skint. I knew about her secret jar, which she described as her rainy day fund, that she had stashed away in the kitchen. It didn't take much to guilt trip my mom. She found it difficult to say no to me since I was the baby of the family. She made me turn around while she grabbed it from her secret hiding place. When I turned back around, she handed me some drink money. I made a promise to pay her back when I got paid again. The look my mom was currently giving me across the kitchen was a warning. My dad shifted his newspaper to one side in order to send me a glaring look. I immediately shrugged my shoulders at him while I chewed on my eggs. He responded by shaking his head before adjusting the newspaper back in front of his face, I suddenly had another flashback from the night before. I was inside the bar with my friends when I received a text message telling me to come to the black BMW waiting outside. I entered the vehicle's back seat before being told to sit in the front. The driver reminded me that he was a drug dealer and not a taxi driver. I only sat in the back because I didn't want him to see all the cash inside my bag, which made it even more awkward for me when I had to reach in to pay him for the cocaine without him discovering how much was inside. Once we made the exchange, I left his car and went back inside to show off to my friends what I now had in my pocket. Thinking about the bag of money only reminded me that I still hadn't come across it. When I finished my scrambled eggs, I scanned the kitchen while I remained seated at the table. When I couldn't see it anywhere, I got up and had a quick look behind the door. "What are you looking for?" my dad asked as he peered around his newspaper. "My dig money?" "My backpack," I stated to both my parents. "It's navy and has brown leather straps on it." My dad didn't bother to answer before going back to his newspaper. My mom continued to clean the frying pan in the sink with her back to me. I took both their silences as a no. I wandered into the living room, where I searched everywhere, including behind every pillow on the couch. What are the chances that my drunken self decided to hide it from my sober self? The last thing I needed was for my dad to find it, or worse, the rightful owner coming by to collect it. That would be hard to explain to a scary drug dealer that I hid it when I was drunk, and I couldn't remember where. Somehow, I didn't think he would take that sort of news fairly well. I knew if the bag wasn't in the house, then there was a fair chance that I had lost it on the journey home. How ironic would it be if I had left it in the taxi that brought me back? It swiftly occurred to me that I was chucked out of the taxi that was supposed to bring me home. And I wasn't alone. I managed to pull. Maybe she has the bag. I remember us both kissing on the dance floor before leaving together in a taxi later. I probably had a selfie with her on my phone. Which one of us ended up being sick in the taxi? It was her that had the driver stop by the side of the road to puke. I vividly remember all the lumps of kebab meat amongst her sick. When she disclosed that she was going to be sick again, the driver rudely demanded that we both get out of his cab. The rest was slowly coming back to me. We both ended up inside an abandoned house next to a farm. I tried to get her to have sex with me. I honestly couldn't remember if we did the deed or not. Within a minute of my sudden recollection, I was sitting in the driver's seat of my 10-year-old black Ford Focus as I reversed out of my parents' driveway. I heedlessly parked my car in a field before crossing the road on foot, where I climbed over an old stone wall in order to access the abandoned house. The pathway leading up to it was now overgrown with weeds. I was quite surprised that two drunk people managed to make it this far in the dark. The shell of the old brick bungalow appeared fine, even though it didn't have any windows or doors, just gaps where they used to be. The main issue with the house was the tree currently growing through the roof. Along with weather conditions, it had now helped create patches of missing roof tiles. The second I stepped inside, I immediately had further flashbacks. I remember the young woman and me attempting to have sex here, but we weren't able to find any suitable spots to do so. We tried on an empty windowsill, but it wasn't comfortable for her bum. She complained about the scratchiness and how cold it felt on her cheeks. I searched through all the rubbish scattered around the abandoned house for the missing bag. The concrete floor was covered with empty cans of dragon soup, a caffeinated alcoholic beverage, and throwaway vape pens. There were a few flimsy plastic garden chairs lying around. There were even old porno mags amongst the mess. I also found a black hoodie in the corner. It was obvious that young teenagers had been using the abandoned house to drink and party. Once the sexual spark between us had unsurprisingly died, me and the woman ended up walking to the nearest garage, where we waited until separate taxis arrived to take us home. For whatever reason, I forgot to ask for her phone number or even her second name, which I could have used to find her on social media. When I was certain my bag hadn't been left there after all, I returned to my car. I now found myself outside the very nightclub where, only 12 hours ago, I had been having the time of my life. I had to retrace my steps, and for the life of me, I couldn't recall even leaving the nightclub, never mind whether I had my bag at that point of the night. As I drove along the same street where the nightclub was, I had a sudden flashback of me eating a burger outside the takeaway shop. For some reason, I remembered talking to the homeless guy who was begging for change. I didn't, did I? I never gave all that money to charity. That sounded like something I would do while drunk. I once gave my jacket to a guy whose t-shirt had been ripped off during an attack in a nightclub by an angry drunk. It was the first time I had worn that jacket out, and it wasn't cheap. There was no sign of the homeless guy anywhere. He was probably in a hotel suite lounging inside a bath full of cash. I found a parking space right outside the nightclub, directly across the street from the bar where I had drunk beforehand. The majority of the young drinkers in that bar would all do the same when they reached a certain level of drunkenness. They'd cross the road and continue drinking in the popular nightclub. I fully expected nobody to answer as I rapped on the large steel door. Maybe I might get lucky. I waited nearly a minute until knocking again. A further minute passed when I accepted that nobody was in. The second I got into the car, I spotted a young woman open the steel door and peer down both directions of the street. I found myself shouting to gain her attention as I jumped out of the car. I rushed over to her and briefly explained my situation, minus the part about the bag containing 25,000 pounds, or how I had already spent some of it on cocaine and Barbie bombs. The expression on her face hadn't seemed to change one bit. She was probably used to idiots like me showing up the next day to confess how drunk they'd ended up. Before I even had the chance to ask if she would check if my bag was inside, she immediately shot down the idea. I thought her abrupt answer was odd, considering she hadn't even bothered to double-check before confidently confirming it wasn't. "It's a navy Herschel bag, with brown leather straps," she said, finishing my sentence. All of a sudden, her facial expression had changed. She was now giving me a dirty look. I thought that describing the bag might encourage her to reconsider checking for me, but I had somehow managed to piss her off instead. "I already told your friend his bag wasn't here," she snapped. "My friend?" "Don't play dumb," she frustratingly told me. "The guy with the Chucky chain." I stared at her. I was gobsmacked. "Chucky?" "Yeah, as in the doll from the movie," she explained. "Your friend was wearing a silver chain around his neck with a Chucky pendant when he came by earlier asking about the bag." I continued to stare at her. Was she referring to the rightful owner of the money? "Listen, I have things to do," she impatiently told me. "So please refrain from getting any more of your friends to drop by to ask about the bag because it's not here." She gave me one last snidey look before she went back inside, slamming the door behind her. I could feel my chin begin to shake. Was the guy wearing the Chucky chain onto me? I scoured both sides of the street in the event that this man had been watching me this entire time before I quickly jumped in my car. I didn't waste any time as I abruptly pulled the car out onto the road, not even to put on my seatbelt. Then I immediately sped off. An Uber driver was counting down the hours to when he could return home to binge watch the rest of The Mandalorian. By that time, his wife and kids would be in bed, allowing the bliss of peace and serenity to commence. So far, the constant rain had helped produce a fairly busy Saturday evening, from picking up elderly people outside the supermarket to dropping partygoers off at bars and pubs. His current customer, who was sitting in the back seat, hadn't stopped talking on his phone since the minute he had been picked up from a local golf club, even though all he had with him was a backpack. The driver earwigged the beginning of the man's phone conversation, but it wasn't interesting enough to retain his attention. And the fact the man kept asking the other person on the phone, "You know what I mean?" after every statement he gave had swiftly gotten on the driver's nerves. The driver's phone, currently resting in the dashboard holder, suddenly flashed with a new job. The driver's eyes lit up. It was only the next street over to where he would be dropping off Mr. "Do you know what I mean?" When he arrived at the man's destination, the driver watched from his rearview mirror as his customer got out of his car without saying a word to him since he was still having an in-depth conversation with his phone. One thing that caught the driver's eye was the customer's peculiar choice of jewelry. A chain with a stainless steel Chucky-shaped pendant waved a knife in the air as it hung against the man's chest. After the man had closed the door behind him, and the driver had discounted the image of the murderous doll from his mind, he drove around the corner to collect his next customer. Once I was home, I went straight to my room, where I lay down on top of my unmade bed. I was rapidly running out of ideas. The only explanation was that one of my friends had been lying to me. But who? I couldn't help but throw a spotlight over my mate Deco, who had just recently lost his job as a courier driver. He specifically told us all on the group chat a few days ago that he was desperate for money to buy a van so he could start his own delivery company. He happened to ask me last night, as we crossed the road to gain entry to the nightclub, if I could lend him some money to get his company started. Deco has also been the one commenting in the group chat, asking how much money was in the bag. And yet, he hadn't mentioned anything to me about borrowing money since we'd both sobered up. Was this because he already had the money? There had been a little bit of bad blood between us in high school. When we reunited years later, we managed to carry on from where we had last left off, like something had happened. And since then, he still hadn't brought up what he had accused me of back in high school. Was the past enabling him to steal the money without any consequence of guilt? Then there was my mate, Jamie. He was notorious for living for the weekend. He was constantly throwing his money away on those virtual roulette machines inside the bookies. He would have an absolute field day if he had a bag full of cash. It obviously wouldn't last long before the bookies had it all. Maybe I should go looking for him. He might get a nice surprise when I catch him slotting 50-pound notes into a roulette machine. The further I reflected on last night, the more I realized anyone in that nightclub could have stolen the bag from me. My mates weren't exactly being subtle about the fact I was buying anyone with a pulse a Barbie bomb. I swear, I heard my mates on more than one occasion tell a complete stranger that I had found a load of money in the backseat of a taxi. Maybe that was why Paige had made a move on me. It was she who approached me last night, embracing me with her hand in the air when she demanded that I shake the hand that shook the world. And come to think of it, she was the one who suggested we climb the wall to explore the abandoned house. As she described it, it would be a laugh. We also took some cocaine while we were there. Did she hide the bag while I was distracted snorting coke? Later, once she was inside her own taxi, she had the driver return there so she could collect the bag. It was within that thought that I couldn't help but notice the same pair of jeans I had worn last night. They were still lying on the floor next to my bed. I got out of bed, picked them up, and quickly removed the small, clear plastic bag from the pocket. I was surprised my mom didn't spot this and didn't say anything to me. I then observed that same small pile of cocaine that had fallen out of my pocket and onto the wooden flooring. That's odd. It had been hours since my mom announced she would vacuum it up. She normally took real pride in maintaining a clean home. Wait a second. I remember now. That was what my mom was referring to when she said I was making too much noise when I got drunk. I was trying to hide the bag somewhere that was impossible for anyone to find. I came home all paranoid that the rightful owner would come looking for it. I even double-checked all the windows and doors were locked before I hid behind the living room curtain for ages to ensure nobody had followed me home. I vaguely recall being overly proud of myself for finding the best hiding place, knowing that nobody would ever look there. So now, all I had to do was allow myself to remember. The answer is in my head somewhere. Maybe if I start drinking, I might be able to think like drunk Alan, and it will come back to me. Have you seen your mother? I looked up to find my dad standing still at my doorway with his arms crossed. The pissed-off look on his face gave nothing away. I haven't seen her since breakfast, I replied. He shook his head at me. Her phone's sitting on the kitchen counter, and she hasn't made me my lunch yet, he said in a stern tone. It's nearly 2 o'clock, he stated, exhaling loudly. Do you want me to make you something, Dad? I asked resentfully. I don't think my dad even knew how to make toast. He had always relied on my mother to feed him. She even made him his lunch to take to work. He raised both his arms up into the air. "That's not the point, son," he explained. "Your mother knows better than to keep my stomach waiting. Have you checked the fridge to see if she's maybe left you something in there? Have you seen the fridge?" he asked, snapping at me. "It's completely empty. That's why I had to send your mother out to the shops in the first place. Who does she think she is?" His face began to turn red. "She's been gone for over 2 hours. Just wait until she gets home." He continued to stare at me with a degrading look on his face. Then he switched his stares to my desk chair, which was covered with random pieces of my Royal Mail uniform. I watched him as his eyes examined them. If I don't initiate a conversation with him, then maybe he'll take the hint and leave. "If I had the same opportunities as you and your generation have been given," he said, lecturing me while he sent a scowled look my way, "I would have made something better of myself." The frown lines on his head grew deeper as he shook his head. "What a waste. When your mother gets back, let her know I had to go to the Chippy to get a fish supper for my lunch." I watched quietly as my dad walked away. A moment later, I could hear the front door slam shut. I started shaking my head in anger. I wasn't surprised my mom was hiding from him. The way he treated her was disgusting. I would have loved to move into my own place, but I didn't think I could trust him alone with my mom. Both my brothers left home the first chance they had to get away from him. And selfishly, they told me not to leave, for Mom's sake. When I was a little boy, when I asked my dad where Mom was, he responded with, "She's ran away with a darky." As an innocent child, I found that response rather funny, so I found myself using that same expression around other people. When another adult pulled me up for using that word, they explained what it really meant. I wasn't shocked one bit. I should have known better not to mimic my dad when I knew what type of person he was. I would have loved it if my mom had run away with another man. Maybe then she might be allowed to pursue a career, or perhaps a life of her own. I abruptly jumped out of bed. I raced over, grabbed the massive pile of dirty uniforms from my computer chair, and carried them into the kitchen. It just dawned on me that I needed them washed for my shift tomorrow. Sometimes my mom would clean them for me while my dad was at work, since he was forever telling her not to, as I was physically capable of doing it myself. Oh my God. I found myself sniggering at the sight of the washing machine. It wasn't long before I was laughing hysterically. I dropped my dirty uniforms onto the laminate flooring to cover the lower part of my face with the palms of my hands. I couldn't believe it. I remember now. Just like that, in a split second, I knew where the money was. It had been right here this entire time, inside the washing machine. It was so funny that I somehow thought this would be a decent hiding place. I knelt on the kitchen floor, removing my hands from my face and staring at the ceiling. I didn't know if there was someone up there watching over me. Either way, looking up at the gods felt like the classic thing to do in a moment like this. I still had a massive smile on my face as I opened the round door to the washing machine and removed the decoy clothes that I had placed there to conceal my bag. That was probably why my drunken self was so pleased. He thought covering the round window was a genius ploy. My smile quickly disappeared the second I realized the bag wasn't inside there after all. Although there was something hidden at the back of the drum. As soon as I pulled it out, I knew exactly what it was. It was my mom's glass jar, the one that gave the illusion from the outside that there was fusilli pasta inside. This was only to deceive thieves from opening it and finding my mom's secret stash. Was she hiding it in there because she knew the washing machine was one of the few places my dad would never look? I then noticed the small, folded piece of paper stuck to the lid with a piece of clear tape. As I went to grab it, I found myself suddenly jumping in fear when I heard the front door being rapped. It was the intent of the rap that had me on edge. The sound from both knocks was so loud I believed that someone had punched the door in. It was most likely my dad trying to enforce his authority as the man of the house. I ripped the piece of paper from the jar, proceeded to unfold it. Then, I was shaken by two further thunderous thuds on the front door. "I know you're in there," Alan Angry Male's voice echoed around the house. I immediately froze in fear. That's not my dad's voice. "If my bag of money isn't in my hand by the count of 10, the bitter man shouted again, "I'll be removing it from your cold, dead hands." I finally let out a breath of air once I realized I had been holding it in this entire time. While I remained completely still, I closed my eyes just as I could hear the man begin his countdown from 10. When I opened them, I noticed I was still holding the note in my hand. I instantly recognized the handwriting right away as belonging to my mother. "Forgive me, son. Please take my rainy day money so you can get away from him too. Love, Mom X." She did it. Mom finally found a way to flee from my dad's coercive grip. I twisted the lid of the jar open. Inside were rolls of cash, nothing anywhere near 25 grand's worth. I dropped the jar onto the kitchen floor when the sound of the front door being kicked in startled me. I stood idle. I had no choice. The fear had taken over my entire body.